Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Onstage podcast. We have a special treat for you today. To your right and to my right, we have a musician who's no stranger to the music scene, Drew Arnott, or Arnett, Drew Arnott. He was part of the iconic 80s group Strange Advance. This year, the band is celebrating 40 years since their debut album, Worlds Away. Strange Advance sold out shows across the country, and now the legendary Canadian pop group, a staple of 1980s much music, is announcing their 2025 tour dates. They've already done Toronto as of June 13th. Now, this is marking their 42nd anniversary of their first breakout album, Worlds Away. Now, the record feature hit singles like She Controls Me and Kiss in the Dark, earning the band a Juno nomination for Most Promising Group of the Year in 1983. That was a long time ago. I was still in high school. Thomas Maraika of AllMusic calls their album one of Canada's most underrated new wave debut releases. Formed in Vancouver in 1979 by Drew Arnott, Daryl Crom and Paul Iverson, Strange Advance created a unique style with influences from various genres. Their albums Worlds Away, 1982, and I guess the second one is called Two with a Two, I think, right? And The Distance Between, 1988. So formed in Vancouver in 1979 by Drew Arnott, Daryl Crom, and Paul Iverson, Strange Advance created a unique style with influence in various genres. The albums Worlds Away, 1982, 1985, and A Distant Between, 1988, achieved gold status and chart success with singles like Rerun and Love Becomes Electric. After a long hiatus, they are back to show that great music has no expiration date. Drew Arnott leads a new chapter joined by Ian Cameron, Ross Friesen, Rob Bailey, Sean Dillon, and Alexander A. Train Boynton. Blending
That's good.
roots and new.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I was interrupting just because Alex isn't in the band anymore.
Oh,
Peter
really?
Troczek, our good friend Peter Troczek, has joined us on bass. So we're very
Yeah,
happy about that.
the bio Eric gave me actually does have Alexander A. Train Boynton in there.
Well,
So,
there's been a mistake that happened somewhere. That
whoa. um, so Strange Advance, bridging the worlds of chart success and defying musical genre conventions, a rare superpower that only happens once in a blue moon. And Strange Advance exemplifies this with a unique style and strong albums. All right. So, welcome to the show, Drew. Glad to have you on. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
my pleasure. Nice to be here.
You're very welcome. Um, could you go back to the beginning and explain why you chose music? What was the deciding factor?
It wasn't really a decision. It was like the decision had already been made. I'd already had. I've always had music in my head. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about this the other day. Uh, we were from Scotland originally, and my mom was very homesick. So we went back when I was like 5 years old. I came out when I was three. Went back a couple of years later and had a nice holiday in the Hebrides, and just loved it. And didn't want to come home. And but when I got home, I could remember calling my mom into my bedroom where I was mournfully playing a tune on a little harmonica somebody had given me. Um, and it was a song about how sad I was about not being in Scotland. Of course, I couldn't play the harmonica to save my life. I was just humming through the thing. And it was like, it must have been a ludicrous sight. But anyway, that's my first sort of musical memory. And then walking to school, I would always have songs in my head. And I think, how am I supposed to get these songs out of my head? Because I became a drummer. And then later I bought a Mellotron. That was my first keyboard instrument. And that was my finally, I have an opportunity to get this music out somehow. So that's how it all began for me.
So, what inspired the original vision behind Strange Advance back in 1979?
I would say Daryl. Daryl inspired it. Um, I met Daryl. Uh, I put an ad in the paper. Daryl responded. I went to his house. And at that point in time, I wasn't writing any songs. I was just a drummer looking to put a band together. And I went down into Daryl's basement. And he started to play me a collection of songs, most original. And I was just blown away. I thought, I found the new David Bowie. This is fantastic. And so he inspired the whole idea of, okay, we've got a shot at something bigger than just a local club band. And but we actually did put a local club band together, and and then discovered that when you've got sort of two creative people, sparks fly, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it isn't. So we ended up basically detesting each other by the end of that process, and so we split up, and he went off and did one thing, and I went off and did another, and then a year or two later, he called me up and, do you want to try writing some songs? And so we did that, and we're very, we're very simpatico. We're very, good friends and stuff. Until it comes to music, then sometimes things get a little out of hand. But but anyway, yeah, Daryl was the inspiration for sure. I thought, yeah, he was as good as anybody I was seeing out there, and that led us down that path. It's like, okay, I think it's possible, and we would record demos, and I would take them to LA and to record companies and try to shop them, and uh, and then eventually we had a little bit of luck. Brian Adams heard one of our demos, and because Daryl was playing in a band that was backing Brian up on his first Canadian tour. And so Brian took the tape to Bruce Fairburn, the producer, who took it to Capitol Records, who said, "Yeah, I already know this group. The demo tape that I'd taken to Capitol Records in Los Angeles made its way up to Toronto, and so they were already prepared to like us, and we got a record deal. That was that."
That's awesome. I love that story. When you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about David Bowie, you said that the death of Bowie was a profound shock, shattering the illusion of immortality and highlighting the unpredictability of life. Writing songs is your greatest passion and adventure that begins with love for each creation. What did you mean by that? David Bowie was like your inspiration for everything you wrote.
Well, something. Actually, Bowie was the person that brought Daryl and I together. Um, yeah, I was just so enamored with Bowie's work in the early days. The Man Who Sold the World, Ziggy, Hunky Dory, all that. That era just was so magical, and it was like so like it just revealed the possibilities in my mind. The music was different. It was otherworldly. I mean, he had that alien thing going on already, and it just sparked so much creativity within us both. And yeah, so that was the beginning. That was the path. You know, falling in love with Bowie, and then of course the bookend of Bowie passing away, and
Yeah.
realizing like it could happen to anybody at any time. So, if we ever wanted to get back out there, we should do it now. And so he instigated the beginning and, well, not the end, but at least, the current version of Strange Advance.
So, Drew, despite accumulating timeless songs, fear, whether of failure or success, has often held you back from releasing your songs. Was it because of Bowie's death, or was it just because you just weren't sure whether I could, or I didn't feel like this is going to work, or
Well, first of all, I'm a person who's let fear guide him a lot of his life. It's prevented me from doing things, and I think that any creative person's it's got to have some element of doubt. Although, getting back to Brian Adams, that's one person I don't think he ever had a shred of doubt about his capabilities or his chances of making it. Because
Mhm.
he was bound and determined. Well, that wasn't me. I was like, I'm in this game by mistake. Somehow, somebody's allowed me to play this game, but I'm really not qualified. So I've always had those self doubts, and I have to say, putting out records that people enjoyed and enough to buy the records or stream the songs now is so gratifying. I mean, it's amazing that after all this time, the music still lives, it's still valid, people still enjoy it. So, but even now, it's like I write songs all the time, but are they strange advance songs, or are they songs that would to please our audience, or are they in genres that our audience wouldn't accept or wouldn't care for? I don't know. You never know
Hmm.
until you actually get it out there. So, but as I say, I'm sure most artists have some sort of fear of rejection or whatever, and sometimes it's like, I've written a masterpiece. This thing is fantastic. It's like, to me anyway, is it going to be fun? Is anyone else going to think it's like, now the doubts creep in. It's like, oh, maybe I won't play this song for anyone just yet. So yeah, it's hard to know. As a matter of fact, I saw a new AI program that will analyze your song and tell you whether it's deserving to be a hit, which I
Wow.
think is ridiculous. I don't buy into that kind of thinking at all. I think that you know if you could analyze what a hit was, everybody would just be churning out number one songs,
Mhm.
and then of course everything can't be number one at the same time. So sorry, your song is number 30. I thought it was a number one song. Well, there's 29 number one songs ahead of you. So,
I wouldn't trust it because I've heard some number one songs that I think deserve to be numbered 100. That's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, I wouldn't trust an AI for that part. So, Drew, how did you meet Ian Cameron, Ross Friesen, Rob Bailey, and Sean Dillon, and of course Alexander Boynton, who no longer is in the group? How did you know that they were the best fit for your band?
well, we toured. Ian was in the very first version of Strange Advance, um, and if you watch any of the early videos, you'll see Ian playing. And they're all friends. They're all friends. As a matter of fact, two of them, Rob Bailey, a keyboard player, and Ross Friesen, the drummer, they played in a band in Vancouver called 3D. And I
Mm,
didn't hear this story until a few years ago. But they played in this synth pop band 3D, and we were friends with them. And Daryl was closer to them than I was. But apparently, when we got our record deal, because it was just Daryl and I at the time, we added Paul from Daryl's cover band, uh, Remote Control, but it was basically a songwriting partnership between Daryl and myself. So when we got the record deal, it was just Daryl and I, and 3D thought, well, for sure they're going to call us. We're going to be their touring act, their touring band. We're going to be backing them up. And they literally just sat by the phone and waited because it was beyond a shadow of a doubt they were going to be our band. And it just never occurred to me, the thought of it, and or Daryl. So so they didn't get to be Strange Advance, except 35 years later or whatever it's been. Here we are, and now they're finally in the band. So and they're pretty tickled by it. So it's good things come to those that wait.
that's true. Um, can I ask you about what happened to Alex Boynton, or is that going to be a secret, something that you want to keep to yourself?
Well, it's not a secret. I thought he would be a great fit for us, and he did a good job. But at the end of the day, stylistically, he plays in a slightly different style than what we were really looking for. So it wasn't the best fit musically. That's all. But he's a
Yeah,
great player, and of course, I had some experience. Um, I was actually after we first when Strange Advance finished their first album, the Paolas were going into the studio, and I guess that was Eyes of a Stranger era,
Hmm.
and they were being produced by Mick Ronson, David Bowie's guitarist, and they asked if I'd like to come in and play some synth, and it was like, okay, sure. Although you've got a phenomenal keyboard player there in Mick Ronson, but I'll take the gig just so that I get to meet Mick Ronson, and uh, and that was very very cool, and
Wow.
yeah, and because again, loving Bowie and realizing the extent of the contributions of Mick Ronson, and he was a big part of the sound. So that was a thrill getting to meet him, and one of my biggest regrets in life not asking him to produce the second
Mhm.
Strange Advance album.
Yeah, we always have regrets like that, and yet we can't go back in time and prevent that.
Yeah,
But Drew, looking back, what do you remember most vividly about the creation of Worlds Away? Like you got songs like "She Controls Me" and then "One Chance a Million." Like usually, and you also got the song "Worlds Away," which probably the name of the album was named after the song. Usually,
yeah.
what do you remember about the creation of it, the song process?
Well, now that when you ask me that question, the first thing that pops in my head is the instrumentation. I had two of the best synths in the world, a Yamaha CS80 and a Roland Jupiter 8, and those two synths were responsible for inspiring, a lot of the sounds on that album, and a lot of the actual creation of the songs themselves. Because like the CS80, I remember bringing it home from the store, and actually they were very nice. They were just letting me try it out, and within like half an hour, I'd written three songs. It was just so inspiring. The sounds are so phenomenal, and I just love the machine. So that's the first thing that occurs to me on that first album. If we hadn't had those two synths, I wonder what the record would have sounded like.
What kind of experience did you have in your life, prisoner?
Sorry, what kind of experience?
Yeah, like usually songs are written from experience. So the word, like the song "Prisoner," is there
Well,
an experience you had relating to that?
yeah, actually, what happened was Bruce Fairbairn had just come off of recording one of the big Loverboy albums, and
Mm.
and I guess he sort of thought, we need something more upbeat and a more rockin' kind of a tune. We didn't agree with him. We didn't want to put Prisoner on the album. But actually, what happened was a friend of his who worked out of the studio we worked at, Little Mountain Sound in Vancouver, um, Peter Baring, he had written the music to Prisoner, and had asked Daryl to write the lyrics. And then Bruce thought, hey, this would be a good song for the album. As I say, we didn't think so at the time. Now I really enjoy the song, and I like playing it. And but yeah, it was basically the only song we've ever done that was kind of like made to order. It's like we need a rock song. Okay, well here's a rock song. But yeah, and as I say, even though it sort of occurred under questionable circumstances, it's a fun song to play, and it's a really good song, and I enjoy playing it.
So how did you and Daryl Crom first connect musically and personally? Did he have to learn all the Strange Advance songs?
Well, there were no Strange Advance songs. Daryl was the only person writing in the beginning,
Mm.
um, and it wasn't until um, yeah, it was actually when Daryl and I split up. He continued on with the band, and
Mm.
I went off to become lighting director for Sweeney Todd. And in that time period, I thought, well, it's about time. I should write a song. I should try to write a song. And as I said, I'd never written anything. I had music in my head, but I never actually, written a song out. So I picked up a British newspaper that my mom had, a Scottish newspaper, and they had a pop page, all the pop
Mm.
music news of the week. And there was a band called Slick, and they had the number one song in Britain called Forever and Ever. So I thought, oh, I'm going to write a song called Forever and Ever, and uh, and I did, and I actually ended up Daryl and I co-wrote it, and uh, and then that summer I was off in Scotland on holiday, and I thought, oh, I better pick up a copy of their Forever and Ever to see how it compares,
Hmm.
and it was a very well produced pop song. They were kind of like the band was sort of a slightly more sophisticated Bay City Rollers kind of an act, you know.
Hmm.
Anyway, then I'm in a music store and I see an ad that Slick are looking for a lighting director, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I went and met with the singer and the manager the next morning and got the job based on the fact that I was the lighting director with the band that had the number one song in Canada, Roxy Roller, and they had the number one song in the UK. So it's like, oh, this is a good fit.
Hmm.
Uh, and of course, then I find out how much they're paying me, and it's like, no, I can't work for that amount of money. So I had to drop down. But the cool thing was that the singer of the band was Mid-Year from Ultravox.
Yeah.
So
Midge.
a couple months ago, he was in town doing a gig. I managed to get backstage and have some one-on-one time on him, and I got to say, "Hey, you used to be my boss, for one for one."
Awesome. That's great. I like hearing stories like that.
Yeah.
Um, when did you realize that the band was making something truly distinct from the musical trends of the time?
Well, it was kind of it was at the time new wave, the new romantic movement, all that kind of stuff, electro pop, synth pop, all those terms were floating around, and we got caught up in them all. But I mean, we were kids from the '70s. That's when we grew up. So we grew up with all the David Bowie, Mott the Hoople, Slade, T Rex, all
Wow.
those people, and
Wow.
so that's where we came from. So it was kind of odd for us then to like, well, they use synthesizers and sequencers. Well, actually, we didn't. We were like, I was faking sequencers, just playing very very steadily. It might have sounded like a sequence, but we couldn't afford one. So anyway, but we got tossed into the new wave heap, and that was fine. There were lots of good music coming out of that, coming out of England especially, and so we just sort of got tossed into that general genre, and but we always felt like we kind of stand apart from that. Uh, I mean, Worlds Away is like a 7 minute epic song. That's
Hmm.
not something that new wave acts were generally doing at the time. I mean, it's been interesting talking about the '80s with people and realizing that technology opened the door to so many people. And when you think, all of a sudden, like Gary Newman, is writing all this material. Well, he can't write. He can't play worth shit. He's I've owned a synthesizer for 2 weeks, and I'm writing a little song on it. It's like, and guess what? It sounds great. You know, no problem with that. And so people like that were suddenly able to make good sounding records and get
Hmm.
their ideas out there, even though they don't have 10 years or 20 years of technique behind them.
Right.
So it made a real big difference, and it meant that most of the people in that new wave category were sort of new to the game, whereas we had been around for a while, and we had the wherewithal to do Sister Radio or Worlds Away or whatever, large, long songs and things. Whereas they were like, well, we got the Ramones, who's not going to sing a song longer than 2.5 minutes, and then here we are doing these big opuses and stuff. So we felt like we stood apart from everybody to some degree. But fortunately, the kids of the time, still adopted us, still liked us, and of course we were writing music that was appealing to them as well. So
Did you get a chance to hang out or meet Duran Duran or Flock of Seagulls or any one of those?
no, no, not really. Excuse me. No, I mean for one thing, when we started, normally what happens, you put out an album and then you tour the record.
Hmm.
But when we put out our first album, we put a band together. We had a couple of the guys that ended up going into Images and Vogue. And
Hmm.
so we had this really great band, and we were ready to tour. Daryl's dad passed away right when we were just ready to leave. So we had to cancel the tour. And then we decided, well, we'll just start working on the second album. And we did that. So by the time we put out the second album, we were popular enough that we could headline. So we missed out on, all those acts. Like, if Flock of Seagulls was coming to town, they would, or a section of the country, they would pick up another act that would open for them. And that would have been us, in the early days, when we didn't have many fans or hadn't sold that many records. So that's how you break an act. But we'd already sort of kind of broken, so we weren't having the opportunity to open for all those acts and get to know people and forge those relationships. So, which is unfortunate, and I have to say, I'm enjoying playing now live much more so than I did back in the '80s. Because I think there's sort of less pressure on us, and also we're more of a proven commodity.
Hmm.
We're not out there trying to prove anything. We're just out there saying, here we are, and here's what we do, and why do you like it? Come and check it out. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but no, as a result, I mean, I would have little run-ins with people. I mean, you'd meet people along the way and stuff, but no, we weren't hobnobbing with the stars, unfortunately.
But Midge Ure from Ultravox. Wow. That's
Well, sure,
amazing.
that was cool. That was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we got to because well, I mean, when we were working on our second album, I got to bring in Earl Slick. Spend a couple of weeks with him in the studio, and he's David Bowie's guitarist, and to get to hear all the stories and things, and for sure, musicians, they were our our idealized heroes and stuff. Those are the people we wanted to meet. Um, like having Alan Holdsworth, one of the world's greatest guitar players ever, in the studio was just the world's biggest thrill for me. When we were in London, we had arranged to we'd attempted to have Mick Karn, the bass player from Japan, come in and play
Wow.
bass, and that was really exciting. Except he was working on now. He's going, if you could just wait 2 weeks longer, it's like no, we can't. Unfortunately, we got to finish this. So, but yeah, so we met lots and lots of great musicians and had great experiences with that, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Well, I know we just lost one member from Blondie, but condolences to the band. But so, what do you think bands like Blondie and Rolling Stones that they go on for years and years, but bands like your bands and others just suddenly break up and they go out and get other jobs and then they regroup? What happened there?
Well, I mean, let's face it. If you're at a Rolling Stones level in the world of success, you have the capacity to work as long as you want.
Hmm.
Um, and like for instance, the '90s were very, very tough on all '80s acts. I mean, all
Mm,
'80s acts disappeared in the '90s.
yeah.
Grunge took over. And Nirvana was like the worst thing that ever happened to new wave. Things changed, and that's just the way it goes. So, and some people survived to the '90s and 2000s by playing small gigs and stuff, and other
Hmm.
people just like left the business altogether. And now it's almost like all those 80s fans are like, okay, we've raised the kids, we've done our careers. Now we just want to go out and see our old favorite acts.
Hmm.
So now there's an opportunity for people to have the old bands back up and running, and get to give the audience a little bit of a thrill, seeing something they didn't think they would get a chance to see again.
Yeah. I know that the Score brothers from Flock of Seagulls, they were out of the music business for years, and one day they thought, we missed this, we should start playing again. And now they're touring again. And all I had to do is just one decision. Okay, Mike, let's go out. That's
Yeah,
great. But sometimes
yeah.
it's people like, um, I think the lead singer of Tommy Two Tone, I forget his name, but he was found working at a software company, and they said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "It's a job. Why aren't
Oh
you
yeah,
Tommy Two?"
yeah, yeah. It's crazy. That
Yeah.
show. What was it? I don't know if it was an MTV show or
Bands
whatever.
reunited.
Yeah, that was great. That was awesome
Yeah,
hearing all the stories, and of
yeah,
course, lots of band members who are like, "Oh, I never want to be in the same room as that guy again," and "Oh, come on, let's do it for the sake of the
hmm,
fans," and they end up doing it and enjoying the process. So
yeah.
that was,
But it was
yeah,
good to see the Score brothers playing again.
yeah,
Um,
for sure.
yep. But we know Strange Advance is often hard to categorize because the music is like, okay, I can't figure this out. Did you feel pressure from labels or media to conform to a specific sound, Drew?
No, no, we didn't because labels are not the best place to find music experts or whatever. Everyone's got an opinion, sure, but I think maybe the beauty of Strange Advance was we were all over the map, and they didn't know what to do with us, so they let us alone, and they liked what we were doing. There was nobody saying, I don't like this, I don't like that. For the most part, as a matter of fact, when the Distance Between came out, the whole record company was like, "Oh, this is going to go ballistic." Unfortunately, not it went sub ballistic, but still, it was still popular.
Mhm.
But the record company was behind us, so no, we didn't have to endure that. Fortunately,
Yeah. What was it like hearing your songs on the radio for the first time?
it was cool, but it was weird because when you go through the process of recording a song, you record the tracks, then you mix the tracks, and then you take those mixed tracks and you give it to a mastering engineer, and he tweaks it and makes it sound a little different. And you so the whole process you're used to, okay, this is how my record sounds. Oh, now it sounds a little better, because it's this is happening.
So, Drew, can you tell us the story behind Rerun? What sparked its creation?
That's a good question. I mean, first of all, the song itself actually was inspired by a dream I had, and it's a funny thing when you're explaining lyrics to songs, because invariably someone's going to go, "Oh, that's not what I thought it was about at all," and so I kind of don't like to ruin people's sort of perceptions of songs, but yeah, I woke up after having this dream, and just wrote it down, and it seemed very lyrical. And yeah, so I was just describing exactly what was going on in the dream in slightly amorphous terms. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily understand specifically reading the lyrics, what I was meaning when I was writing the lyrics. And I kind of like that to keep it open ended for people, so they can take whatever they want out of the lyrics. But the other thing is, I had a patch on the Jupiter 8, and it was a really cool sound. It was a gated sort of pad thing, and I just loved playing around with it. And then I married it to the ideas that I'd had in this dream, and then Ed Shaw, who plays guitar for Images in Vogue, he was with us at the time, and he had a suggestion for me, and had a delay through, like a whatever we were using at the time, a Roland Space Echo or something, and it just gave the feeling. It sort of set down the feeling of the song. Just this putting this little delay on his guitar part, it was like, oh, perfect. Now I'm in tune with this whole thing, and can finish it off, in a much better way than I would have otherwise. So it was really a group effort. If anyone wants to learn about it, they can go to strangeadvance.com, and I don't know, maybe there's something called stories, or maybe under lyrics there's a stories or something, and I tell the story of making We Run, and it was quite an epic event, involving a lot of people and a lot of time, and yeah, it was an interesting experience.
Yeah, and we will also have the link to your website down below in the description, all your music and songs. How do you feel about Two? I know it's an underappreciated gem, but how do you view that album today?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't listen to Strange Advance stuff. I'm constantly writing more songs.
Mm.
That's what's on my mind. I don't go back and listen to our records. It's funny. You'll go places and people will put on your music. It's like, are you under the impression I need to hear my own music all the time? It's like, um, yeah. So I don't really have. I'd have to go back and see what's on it. I mean, obviously, Home of the Braves on it. That was a great track. Um, Actually, it's one of the coolest stories I've got for making that record. Um, we were in the studio, and I wanted a big solo, and and so I was looking for a guitarist, and I brought in a couple of people. It didn't work out, and
Mm.
the assistant engineer said, "Well, what about Simon?" It's like, "Who's Simon?" "Oh, that's the kid out in the hallway pushing the broom." It's like, "Really?" "Yeah, he plays guitar. He's pretty good." So I said, "Fine, bring him in." So anyway, he did this scorching solo on it, and it just made the song, and it makes it so exciting to play it live now because Ian Cameron, our lead guitarist, also plays violin. So he does Home of the
Wow.
Brave on the violin. Does he? No, no, he does Alien Time on the violin. He does Home of the Brave on the guitar. Sorry, and he does an awesome job. It's a great song to play live. So yeah, I don't really have any. I don't have a favorite album. It's like I have favorite songs that change from time to time. And the only time I listen to our music is like now, for instance, I'm going to go back and have a listen to pick another song, maybe a more of an obscure song to throw into the set for the diehard fans who won't get a chance to hear something like that probably ever again. So, but that's the only time I would listen to it.
Yeah. So what is it? How does it feel to be performing these songs again after so many years?
Well, when we started, as a matter of fact, the first gig we played was you know mostly theater seats, and then standing room down at the front. And we're playing, it's like I'm looking at the people and going, "Oh, they're not really moving in their seats or anything." It's like, are they enjoying this or not? I can't tell.
Mhm.
But after every song we've ever played, tumultuous applause, people going nuts, and so yeah, it's so rewarding to know that that people still like your stuff after all this time. That it's still meaningful to them, and which makes it meaningful to me.
Yeah, I want to ask you about your song "Noble Heart." That's a cover of the Spoon song "Gord Dieppe" and Sandy Horn.
Hmm.
How did you approach them, and why that one? Because I love all their music.
Well, they approached us. They were putting a CD together, having artists cover their songs,
Hmm.
and Noble Heart had already been taken, and so so yeah, Nova Heart had been taken, and so I was going through the catalog trying to decide, what song I wanted to do a cover of, and then Gord called me and said, um, "We got the Nova Heart back. We didn't really like it. Would you like to tackle Nova Heart?" And at the same time, somebody else was tackling Nova Heart again, and then when we did our version, Gord said, "They're fantastic. I'm going to end off the record with your version of Noble Heart." So it's sort of, I think it kind of bookended their CD for them. But yeah, it's a great song, as you know,
Hmm.
and one of the few songs from the '80s that I wish I had written. So, and it was a lot of fun to work on. Trying to come up with our own take on it.
Yeah, it was really good. I was like, no, really, this is like a cover of the Spoon song. And I said, oh, Sandy Horn and Gord Dieppe. They live in Burlington, I think. I think they still do today.
Yeah.
Um, what's been the most surprising part of reconnecting with fans, both old and new, on tour?
Well, actually, that is probably the most surprising thing. The fact that there are so many new fans. It's like I always assume when I'm approached by a person who's like under 30, all right, well, I guess your parents probably, you know, played our music and infected your brains with it or something. It's like, no, no, no. I discovered it all by myself, and I just love music from the '80s, and and they just discover it. As I guess young kids especially, they do a lot more exploring on Spotify, etc., than I probably ever would have.
Hmm.
They're devoted to, music is a very meaningful thing for young people, of course. So they just dive in there and they make their discoveries. And yeah, I mean, the other day I got an order for a CD from England, and I always like to ask, are you Canadian or how did you come across? And I thought, well, we got to put a fair push in the UK back in the '80s. I thought, well, it could be an old time fan, but no, she just discovered us on Spotify and really liked it and wanted to hear more. So it's very cool.
Do you think that the audiences are different from 1980s to the audiences today with your songs?
Well, there isn't as much pogoing going on as there was in the '80s. I can tell you that. Um, I mean, when we first went out after the second album, I had no idea who our audience was. It's like who's listening to us, who's buying our records, and then of course it's young people. High school students, college students, that age group. And now, of course, you go out there and now you're meeting, the parents of or the grandparents of those fans. But that no, it's all just them. So it's we've just all grown up together. You know? And
Yeah.
also it's because of social media, people have more of a connection with the acts now. They can reach out, they can actually connect with me or anybody in the band, and that's not something that we had in the '80s. That just wasn't possible. There was no internet. It just wasn't going to happen. So
Hmm.
that's been a major change in the reaction to fans as well.
Drew, is there a certain song from your catalog of songs you wish more people knew?
Hmm. That's a good question. Again, I'd have to go through my catalog. Um, one song, one song I always liked, um, although I wouldn't say we did it 100% justice, but "One Chance in a Million." It's got I'm using my favorite synth, and uh, and it's sort of a loosely, uh, lyrically, it's just sort of right down the middle of my sort of particular tastes and stuff. So and actually, I think we played it live in the '80s maybe at some point, but I was thinking the other day of maybe adding it to the set. But yeah, that's a song I'd like people to have a listen to.
Yeah, a lot of your music is good, especially Water Music and Worlds Away, the reprise, and also the song. Um, but you dabbled in screenwriting and mentoring artists. How have those experiences influenced your music?
Well, working with young artists, first of all, you have to develop patience because, sometimes you're working with people that think they're ready for the big time. It's like,
Yeah.
no, you're not quite there. You got to do some work on this aspect or that aspect, and so yeah, you definitely have to develop more patience. And for me,
Hmm.
that was a good lesson to learn. And but basically, I sort of took a page from Bruce Fairbairn's book. He produced our first album, and I worked with him on other albums for other acts. And really, the secret is work with people that have great songs. You know, if you want a hit song, it's like produce somebody who's written a hit song. Don't try to change something that's
Hmm.
not very hit like into. It's like no, go back to the source material. Just wait until they've got that key track and stuff. So there's definitely lessons to be learned, but yeah. And as far as screenplays go, well, that's just you get to let your imagination run wild, and and it's a totally different animal, of course, than writing a song, because in a song you've got to condense all your ideas and just have very concise ideas or thoughts that you're delivering. You don't have time to sort of ramble on, and so yeah, and again, it's I've been lucky enough that what I do naturally, some people seem to like, and I'm not trying to I'm not trying to write like a big hit song or anything. I just do what I do, and I'm not trying to impress anybody with writing a symphony or whatever. It's like whatever comes out, and I'm happy if anybody likes it at all.
What if you had a possibility of time traveling, and how would the Drew Arnott of 1982 react to seeing Drew Arnott in 2025 still rocking stages and turning heads?
Well, I would be quite shocked. My younger self, I'm sure, would be quite shocked because, I mean, you grow up in the music business, you're well aware that there is a shelf life to everything. And I can remember reading an article, talking about screenplays. I think it was William Goldman, and he started off the book saying, do you know who the number one movie star of whatever particular year it was he was talking about? And people are like guessing, uh, you know, Sean Connery or Harrison Ford or whoever was like the big stars of the day. It's like nope, nope, nope. Burt Reynolds. Now, Burt Reynolds was the number one movie star in the world for like a
Mm.
2 or 3 year period,
Yeah.
and then just basically fell off the edge of the earth.
Hmm.
As far as being a in demand actor and stuff. So the point is that you can be huge 1 minute and not huge the next, and which is why you see so many poor old rock and roll types struggling today.
Hmm.
Uh, we don't treat our artists or our creators very well in society. So if you're lucky enough to have had enough success in the early days that you can still get out there and perform and perhaps earn a living, that's great. But there's so many people that don't really have that opportunity.
I must ask you this question. What do you think of AI music? So there's two. I think back then, I think a year or so ago, there's like Suno and Udio, two music generation programs. How do you feel about AI in music? Like, would you want a song be written that sounds like you, but it's not you?
Well, no, because first of all, I like to think that whatever I write um, is going to be different than what I've written before. Maybe some things might line up, but generally speaking, I'm not trying to repeat the past. And and no, that would bring me no satisfaction whatsoever. It's like, and I've heard a lot of AI stuff, and it sounds solid. It sounds solid. I haven't been inspired by anything I've heard yet, but it's yeah, that sounds like an actual band playing that actual tune, and good for you. But it doesn't move me, so I don't really care about it. And lyrics, you can forget about it. So far anyway, I've read some pretty awful AI lyrics, and yeah, but who knows? I mean, imagine if AI had the capacity to download, Paul McCartney and Sting and David Gilmour, all the ideas of all the great creators, and then spew out, you know, well, again, it's going to spew out things that sound like all those people, but aren't those people. And is it going to be as good as? I mean, even today, Paul McCartney's not churning out, fantastic Beatlesque
Mhm.
songs, as he did back in the day. He's sort of, it's he's kind of like it's a little bit milk toasty these days. I'm sorry, Paul, if you're listening, but so I don't expect AI to like take their ideas and expand upon them. It's like, oh, who would ever have thought that that's the direction that music would go in? I don't anticipate AI. Anyway, the bottom line, apparently, I'm not a fan of AI in music. I prefer the do-it-yourself version of music.
It must be really fun to be able to do a 40-second anniversary of Strange Events and start. You performed in Toronto. That went pretty well, I assume. Now you're
Oh
going to be
yeah.
traveling all the way around until at least August. That must be exciting for you.
Oh, it is. It is exciting for us. Although I can tell you, we're not doing that many dates, and I don't want to do that many dates. Apparently, I'm not too different than I was in the '80s, because travel today is not a fun thing.
Mhm.
Airports, not the nicest places to hang out. So I guess unless you're in airport lounges and flying first class, then life is but a dream. But we're not in that position, so we got to like you know go through the grief of travel the same as anybody else, and spend hours driving across you know sometimes very boring territory. So it's not the most glamorous thing and most fun thing in the world, but when you get a chance to get on stage, that's the big payoff.
That's awesome. Wow, Drew, Arnett. I love this interview. Thank you so much for the interview. Everything will be linked down below, everyone, all his music and his website. One final question. It's like I know I mentioned to you in the question about you mentoring like young artists and stuff. What is the one piece of advice you have given them that, they would take away with them and become great musicians?
Well, it's advice that I've had myself, and I would offer it to anybody. You've got to dig into what makes you you. What separates you from the crowd, and you got to focus on that. And do not try to emulate what's on the radio, what other bands are doing. You just do what's real to you and what's true to you, and then you've got a chance of standing out from everybody else and being noticed and maybe getting a shot.
I remember when I had Glenn Shurock, who used to be the lead singer of Little River Band, on the show, and I asked him the same question, and he goes, "Don't." I was just laughing.
oh,
I was just laughing. It's
oh,
hilarious.
what? Oh, yeah. Because let's face it, the reality is, very few people are going to be able to make a living doing music, and which is why I suggest do anything musical, do anything musically related that you can. Keep your hand in there, but okay, well, I want to be the lead singer of a big rock band. It's like, well, okay, maybe at one point in your life that might happen, but that's not the first thing you should be doing. I can't tell you how many roadies have gone on to, join the band that they're roadieing for,
Hmm.
replacing the bass player, the drummer, or whatever. It's like there's any number of ways to make it. So, yeah, just hang in there. That's the other thing. You got to be super tenacious. Just don't
That's
quit.
true. Snoop Dogg is removing all his music from Spotify because they just don't get paid enough, and he's moving to a blockchain. I don't know if you ever heard of that, and So what do you think of that?
Well, Spotify have had it their own way for a while now, and certainly don't pay out very much money. And
Mm.
people say like one of our albums isn't on Spotify, and and for the fans' sake, somebody should really make that happen. It's not my responsibility. I can't actually do it, but from a financial point of view, it's like it makes no difference to me because it's like, oh, here's an extra 12 cents. Well, thank you
Yeah,
very much. It's
ridiculous.
kind of pointless financially for artists. So I don't blame Snoop at all.
That's awesome, Drew. Yeah, I really appreciate the interview. And so, yeah, so we're going to end the stream, everyone. Wait right there, Drew. Thank you for joining us, Drew. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And look forward to, another show at some point. Here we go.